Hi, this is David. My group is discussing the instructional design model Smith and Reagan, and this is part 2, where I'll be covering similarities and differences between this model and the ADDIE process, as well as some of Smith and Reagan's limitations. There are 3 phases in the Smith and Reagan instructional design model: analysis, strategy, and evaluation. We'll go through these one by one and talk about how ADDIE fits into each. ADDIE is, of course, analysis, design, development, implementation, and evaluation. As you can see from this list, there is some overlap with Smith and Reagan here. You've probably already noticed 2 of the phases of Smith and Reagan share a name with steps from this process, analysis and evaluation. But it's not exactly a one-to-one comparison. In the first step of Smith and Reagan, analysis, the instructional designers take time to consider the learning context, which is how and where the learning is taking place in terms of environment. They analyze the learners themselves, so that's their motivations, skills, and previous experience, and learning tasks, which are some of the actual goals for the instruction. They then write out the test items, which is a description of what the learners should know or be able to do upon completion of the course or courses. This process of looking at needs and goals first and then determining the content is an example of backwards design. The steps of ADDIE that are involved in the analysis phase are, of course, analysis, when they're assessing the learners and their needs, and design, which is when they're describing the tasks. I would say there's even a little development here because they're coming up with test items. Phase 2 of the Smith and Reagan instruction design model is strategy. The designers determine organizational strategy, delivery strategy, and management strategy. They then write and produce instruction based upon those determinations. This is more design and development in ADDIE terms, which means they're deciding on the structure of the content and actually producing that content. Let's define some of these terms on the left. So organizational strategies are how the content is organized or structured. It's just the order of things. Delivery strategies are how it will be delivered. So that includes the format of the content and the delivery medium, as well as the class size or groupings. Management strategies include scheduling and allocation of resources. Smith and Reagan's Phase 3 is evaluation. Obviously, this corresponds to evaluation in ADDIE, but we should point out a couple of things here. Smith and Reagan is an iterative approach to design, which means that the process is tested and repeated to improve the content. When we say formative evaluation here, we're talking about testing that occurs prior to delivery of the instruction. This is usually internal testing, and then the designs are tweaked according to the results. So the phase also involves development here. Some of the distinctions that should be clear when comparing and contrasting Smith and Reagan to ADDIE are, first of all, the implementation isn't really part of the Smith and Reagan model. All of the stuff we've been talking about happens before content is delivered. The designers are not present when the instruction actually occurs, so by the time implementation actually happens, the work is already done. In addition, Smith and Reagan emphasizes iteration, which ADDIE doesn't. And finally, we talked a little about formative evaluation, which occurs prior to content delivery, and I would say that's a little different from the ADDIE process because ADDIE kind of implies a post-delivery evaluation. This is our last slide. It's just to cover some of the limitations of the Smith and Reagan model. This model is not intended for small projects. It's what would be used to design an entire course or a whole program, not just a single lesson. It requires a lot of upfront initial work, it takes a dedicated design team, and it requires significant resources to do it right. That's all I've got. Thanks for listening. Check out part 3 next.